from a mindfulness academy, which actually teaches mindfulness. It's a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations, used as a therapeutic technique. It's a perfectly accurate definition of mindfulness, but it's a little wordy, and I think unnecessarily wordy. So instead of talking about mindfulness with this textbook definition, I'll talk about it in the context of what it's not, which is something that we can all relate to, or I'm sure that we've all seen very frequently. And it's just become, well, more difficult to keep our students engaged and keep them present and keep them mindful about whatever's going on or whatever it is you're trying to relay to those students. And so this is a cover from Time magazine that a lot of people want to be more mindful and be more aware, given that we face all of these constant distractions. This is a picture from the World Economic Forum, where Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's an MIT professor, led a number of workshops at the World Economic Forum. And a number of businesses have also incorporated mindfulness into their own businesses and encouraged their employees to practice mindfulness and led mindfulness sessions. So companies like Google, companies like Intel, Aetna, Apple, a number of technology companies in particular. So it's a matter of just being able to calm your mind, being aware of what's happening, and that can help you in terms of, well, learning and being able to focus and being productive in whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so all we do in this study, it's a pretty simple idea. We try and measure students' mindfulness levels at both Youngstown State, where I teach, and Florida Atlantic, where Eric's teach. We give surveys to principal students and then see if there's a relationship with their performance in our principal's classes. And the way mindfulness is measured, well, there's a number of surveys out there developed primarily by psychologists that try and measure mindfulness levels. One of the original and probably most well-known that's been used, it's called the Mindfulness Attention and Awareness Scale. It's a 15-item survey that's based on a 6-point Likert scale between very frequently and very infrequently, how frequently students are distracted. They ask students to fill out this mindfulness survey, which is used to judge their mindfulness levels. Then we ask them a number of other questions: how often they use social media, so how often they are distracted by technology, their course preferences, their anxiety levels when they take tests, their phone usage during class, basic sociodemographic characteristics, how far it takes them to get to school, and their employment status and how much they work, a number of other questions as well, and see just, well, what the relationship is, not just between mindfulness, but also between mindfulness and student performance, but also these other measures as far as their distraction levels. All right, so here's the mindfulness assessment survey. I'm not going to list all 15 questions, but here's just a representative sample of 4 of them. I tend to walk quickly to get to where I'm going without paying attention to what I experience along the way. The higher the score, the more mindful you are, because the less frequently that you're distracted by whatever it is that you're being asked about. I forget a person's name. I'm sure this is something we can all relate to. So there's a lot going on here. This is just some basic descriptive statistics. It just looks at the averages between a number of different characteristics. It's slightly higher at Florida Atlantic, the mindfulness level, compared to YSU. Part of that, who knows, it could be just the demographics of Florida Atlantic students compared to YSU students. Men are slightly more mindful compared to women. Here's mean mindfulness levels by amount of hours that they work. So this breaks down mindfulness scores by grade. At Florida Atlantic, those who earn an A, which is the first bar, are more mindful, which is encouraging, which is what we want. Between the mindfulness index and final average, at Florida Atlantic, it's 0.06. So to be honest, it's not as high as we were hoping. At YSU, it's a lot higher, 0.32. Between final exam and mindfulness, at Florida Atlantic, there's basically no relationship. It's 0.002. It's negative, actually, but basically 0. At YSU, it's 0.18, so it's a lot lower, which is interesting in terms of, it seems mindfulness is closely related with how they do in the class, not how they do on that final, which is probably an indication of, well, their knowledge and how much they've actually learned in the class. And so mindfulness might be more strongly related with how they care about the class and their desire to do well, rather than how much they're actually learning in that class. Okay, so with all this, you can still say, well, so what? What am I supposed to do, especially as an economics instructor, with this? That even if there is a strong relationship between mindfulness and student performance, am I supposed to start class with a mindfulness bell and have a moment of silence, or lead mindfulness workshops with my students or something like that? And the answer is, well, no. You could. I mean, that'd be great, but can't be expected to do something like that. But I do think there's an opportunity for us as economics instructors to talk about mindfulness in the context of things that we already talk about as economic instructors, which means that mindfulness is about properly valuing the present moment, about being present and not being distracted and being willing to focus on whatever it is that you're around, no matter how bored you are, no matter how interested you are in whatever's going on, to be willing to not be distracted. And so it's a matter of, can we get students to recognize or even at least consider the costs associated with constantly being distracted? And there's a number of studies that have looked at the effects of constantly being distracted. I'm not going to run through all of them. But on average, employees visit Facebook 21 times every day, check their email 74 times every day. So it's an enormous amount. And this is just employees. It's probably a lot more even for our students. And this presents challenges to focus and learning. The ability to retain knowledge as well as to come up with new ideas is also affected. That as we do more of this, well, our ability to understand things decreases. And so to try and get students to consider this cost when it comes to constantly being distracted is something I think we can do in the context of opportunity costs. That this is a pretty famous study that some of you might recognize. That do economists recognize an opportunity cost when they see one? It got a lot of media publicity because, well, the results were incredibly dismal. The way it was judged was by asking about 250 PhDs in economics this question. You want a free ticket to see an Eric Clapton concert, which has no resale value. Bob Dylan is performing on the same night and is your next best alternative activity. Tickets to see Dylan cost $40. On any given day, you would be willing to pay up to $50 to see Dylan. Assume there are no other costs of seeing either performer. Based on this information, what is the opportunity cost of seeing Eric Clapton? About how opportunity cost is defined. You know, am I talking about, say, the Robert Frank definition, McGraw-Hill, net benefits associated with the next best alternative, or am I focusing on kind of the Eric Chang core economics value of what's given up? Maybe if it's value of what's given up, I would be willing to pay $50, so maybe that's the right answer. If it's net benefits associated with the next best alternative, it's 10. I have about 30 seconds before I have to run to this session. So the correct answer is E. This is ridiculous. Get this out of my face. That I actually gave this, so I was a part of this survey. Laura Taylor was my dissertation advisor at Georgia State in Atlanta. She asked if I would be willing to help. I said, of course, just let me graduate. And so I handed out the survey to probably like 25 or so different economists. And this was an actual answer that I got from older economist, about 75. He took about 10 seconds to look at it and just handed it back. Said, this is ridiculous. Get this out of my face. I said, well, I kind of agree with you. That to ask PhDs in economics, especially in that context where they're kind of worried about other things, to just answer this and then use that to judge the accuracy of how well we understand the concept of opportunity cost, I think it's flawed. One, it's a wordy question. Two, kind of this hypothetical, there's these numbers thrown around. Three, even if they get it right the vast majority of the time, it doesn't even mean that they understand what opportunity cost is. Which means even if we can convince our students to get, or teach our students in a way that they can get this question right, doesn't mean that they understand what opportunity cost is. It means they memorize that definition and can plug the numbers in. How this is relevant to mindfulness, I think it's a matter of, can we get students to recognize the value of their time in the context of when they do anything, as simple as checking their cell phone in class, to think about, well, what they're giving up as a result of that, which means to get them to think about the costs associated with being mindless. And so an alternative question that I think could be asked, what's the opportunity cost associated with using your phone during class? Of course, you always have to have 0. B, the additional cost to your phone bill associated with the data you use during class. C, the resale value of your phone divided by the number of minutes you used it during class. Or D, the value of what you would have learned had you not been using your phone. That hopefully the majority of students, or at least more than 21%, would be able to get this question right. And it might lead them to actually think, well, maybe I am giving up something as a result of constantly using my phone. And hopefully they won't choose E, right? This is ridiculous, get this out of my face. So that's all I got.